So in the Wisdom Archive, what I'm doing is I'm coming at you from the movement side, which is the yoga side. And I know that you've done yoga for a long time, and I also know that you've got a relationship with a guru. So in some ways, you represent a very traditional line of yoga. And in another way, because you work with the hospital and with what I'd call adjunct therapies, you
I like
also
that. Yes, yes,
you
yes.
you also are kind of in the modern stream as well. So one thing that occurred to me is this is a sort of unique path, and I'm interested in how you got on it. And maybe if you had things in your childhood that were sort of directive, like signposts.
This is a great question. Do you need to know who I am for your interview? Because it doesn't say on my Zoom. Let me rename myself. It says my job on it.
Yeah,
So
well,
I'm Avril, and I've known Alan for a really long time.
Avril James Hurt. We'll use
No, not Hurt.
No, Avril James
Maynard.
M-A-Y.
N-A-R-D. Yep.
Okay.
And yeah, I kept it my Hurt email because it's just confusing. You know this when you move and change things. It's helpful to have one constant for the world. My promise to myself over the next year is I have a new email to start putting the auto forward on it. So I don't have to tell anybody, but it'll go to the new one, you know?
I get it. Okay, good.
So signpost in my childhood. Well, first of all, I grew up in a very traditional, like American home in the sense that my parents were extremely heteronormative and extremely rule and role bound. My dad was the provider. My mother did work, but I would say that she worked, maybe when they first got married, it was more of a necessity, and it transformed more into her work was more optional and creative so that she could really be home. When I was very little, she was a full-time flight attendant, but then that shifted a couple years into my childhood. Okay. I think that my mom's interesting life background precluded me to be a person who liked to explore. My mother was born in Latin America, in Panama, and then she became an international flight attendant in the 60s, which was a huge deal. It was a beautiful career. It was like being a supermodel. And the fact that she was Black and a flight attendant and a polyglot, she spoke French, Italian, Spanish, and Portuguese. She was just a very believed in exposure, you know?
Yeah.
My dad was just a very introverted person, very patriarchal, but loving, hardworking. But at the same time, I watched that I was asking it a question. He has this side to him that loves spirituality and history. So he was like king of the PBS special. And when I was very little, he made a choice to leave the Catholic Church that my mother had grown up in. And he was not Catholic, but I was being raised Catholic via their marriage commitments. Yeah. And he was like, I want to join this Black church that I found. It was like on a PBS local special called St. Charles. And the reason he wanted to join St. Charles is it was founded by Black people who had never been enslaved and had this glorious history. It wasn't even so much the theology, it was that it represented a lineage. And when I was a kid, because of my mother being so open-minded, my father had to be pretty open to be attracted to her. She had been a ballet dancer too. So she, I was around gay people and artists and things like that all the time. Yeah. When I was little, I was in church and the minister said to me, this was a defining moment, that we were going to go to hell if we didn't accept Jesus as Lord. And this was extremely confusing to me because I knew I was going to church, but I didn't really get it. Like, Jesus was like this cool dude. Somehow he died. I like drinking the grape juice because in the Methodist Episcopal Church, you could take communion whenever. You didn't have to have a first communion. I was like about 7 or 8 at this time. I think I was Catholic till I was about 6 or 7. And I had a lot of Jewish friends. I grew up in New York. And, I was like, so my Jewish friends are going to go to hell because they're not Christian. Like I understood that they had Hanukkah and I had Christmas and they didn't do the Jesus thing. Like, I got that much.
Yeah.
And so I said that. I said, I don't like that. You're saying my friends are going to go to hell. And the minister wouldn't say anything. So I get home and my dad goes, look, I don't really believe that shit, but I take you to church because it's a nice thing to do. And when you're older, if you want to do something different, as long as you believe in God, that was his little, thing for him.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care. That's what he told me. So I instantly was free to explore. And then a few years later, because of performing arts, I ended up at a Jewish summer camp. Yes, me at a Jewish summer camp that had a performing arts program. It was run by the YMHA instead of the YMCA. So here's the little chip in the cookie, except for the couple of falashas that were there. Now they call them beta, the Israeli Ethiopian Jews, and me. Yeah. And on Fridays, I would have Oneg Shabbat, and we'd have the little challah and everything. And we took Jewish culture every Wednesday. So I just grew up in this very open exploration of religion. Mm-hmm. I fast forward, I'm in college and I'm just kind of like a hippie, and, I'll do the edited version of this. Yeah. And, I knew through other kinds of exploration with some of your friends as well, that there was just more. And I was already a dancer and I had been a gymnast and I was always an athletic person. And I literally just said, I want to start doing yoga. Like, I feel like this will be helpful for me as a person. Mm-hmm. And within a week, someone approaches me in my circle and is like, you should do real yoga. Like, let's not go to that hot yoga place and just do yoga. Let's do real yoga. And they took me to Siddha Yoga. So here I am, like, this is before yoga got trendy. I had this little magical time of getting into yoga. I'm going to silence all these different beeps and whistles that I got going on. Right. Yoga made a turn in the late 90s. I would say the internet was really a big changer for yoga, just like it was for everything. Mm-hmm. Where even in 1996, if you said you were doing yoga, people were like, what is that? And in Atlanta, there were two places you could do yoga then. There was the Bikram studio, which was on Amsterdam, and the Iyengar studio, which was in the bottom of the DAR building. How creepy is that? Because they were renting space from them. Mm-hmm. So other than that, there was just this chanting. So I luckily got in with the chanting first, and then would go to the studios and say, I'm doing some asana at home. I started hanging out with you around that time. I'm doing asana with this guy, Alan. Mm-hmm. And how come we don't talk about any of the philosophy in the classes? And the hot yoga guy was just like, I don't know any of that stuff. Like, he flatly was like, I have no idea what bhakti yoga is. I'm reading books. That's just me. When I got into it, next thing I know, I'm at the Wish Fulfilling Tree, which is, remember that great bookstore that had the vegetarian feed? Mm-hmm. And I'm doing the correspondence course. I just felt that I was connected to something that was greater than myself, and it gave me back an absence of religion. Right. And in Siddha Yoga, despite all the drama that organization entered into, the teachings that they were sharing were authentic. Right. And the teachings are the guru. The people aren't the guru. The guru is the transmission of the knowledge. So despite the foolishness of maybe inappropriate behavior on some of the elders, you could get to the truth even there. Yeah. So my theory is, once I was chanting the Guru Gita, which was still on a shelf over there, mm-hmm. and there's a line in it that says, you wouldn't even be doing this chant if you hadn't been doing this essentially for lifetimes. And it's mm-hmm. going to create the kind of karma that in future lifetimes, you'll be propelled forward. And it was like when I heard that line, I knew that I was just picking up from something I had done somewhere else before. Okay. And so ultimately, when I left Siddha Yoga, because I just felt there was a lot of money involved, like I had to pay to go here and pay to go there. And below the age of like 24, 25, you would get cheaper things. And then once you turned a certain age, it was really expensive. And I was a full-time asana teacher by then. And the story of how I ended up being, and I say asana teacher, because I can't really teach yoga. I say yoga to people who don't know, was because of you. I was taking your classes and I was going to Siddha. I was going to the Iyengar studio. I was reading a ton. My whole life was trying to figure out how to do this because there weren't yoga teachers training programs at the gym like there are now. And you said, I'm going to Africa. You understand what you're doing. I want you to do this routine and you won't mess it up. And then the next thing I know, there I was.
Right.
So I left them. So next thing I know, I'm teaching full time. I just told the universe I want to teach full time, and it happened. I can't explain it other than it was just my path.
Yeah.
And while I was in this path, I realized that it was a little bit hard to live full time, teaching 30 classes a week. You know, there's no health insurance. There was no, what if I get injured and I need to miss 2 weeks of classes? There's a part of me that was raised by very traditional people who wanted me to go to college and wanted me to have a job and really had wanted me to be a doctor. That was the belief that I was going to be a doctor for a long, long time.
Okay.
And, you know, doing all this yoga and doing other explorations in shamanism, let's just say that, I ended up dropping out of college. And then I got very good at teaching yoga. And I was like, okay, now I want to go back, but I want to go back to learn biomechanics. I want to go back to learn kinesiology. That's something I'm really interested in. Before I was just in college because my parents told me to go to college.
Yeah.
Then I went back and I did really, really well.
Good.
So I had been teaching for years now, still with philosophy, but there was a hole from kind of like my early 20s to having my son, needing a good job, deciding to go back to school and trying to find another teacher. Because Siddha Yoga, I was not happy with how much they cost and some impropriety that I had become aware of. And I was on the internet Googling about something called the koshas. And they're these energetic sheaths that, for lack of a better word, envelop the soul. And in the yoga philosophy, the most external one is the one that you see. The most gross one is the one that you see. But then you have subtler and subtler and subtle bodies until all the way at the center, which is the Atma. And I Google, and this teacher shows up. I had a great book with it by Georg Fairstein called Shambhala Guide to Yoga. It was, I had even reached out to Georg a little and gotten some correspondence. I'm Googling koshas because I wanted an image to put in this little teacher's training packet that I had been charged to teach at the yoga studio that I was working for while going to college at the same time, because I like to always make things hard. And Swami Jay, my teacher, shows up on there. And I sent him an email because I'm trying to be ethical. And I say, hey, I really like this image. May I use this for my teacher's training class? And he said, I am so grateful that there's actually a yoga teacher who wants to teach this. Because by this time, yoga had become really trendy. So this was like 2004, 2003-ish. And a half. And now the internet had just changed everything. In 8 years, 10 years, it went from, I had to order yoga mats on a roll from a catalog to be able to go to Target and buy a yoga mat. It was so fast. It was so fast. It went from California and people here telling me that meant I was in a cult to everybody does. People do yoga in their church. So Swami Jay was just really, really into the technology. And he has a website still that was like the second coming of Christ. I mean, it just had every yoga text on it, all of his theories on them, all of his, everything for free. And on a crazy whim, he invited me to come down to his ashram. I'm married. I have a little kid. And I tell my husband, Chad, hey, I'm going to go down to Fort Walton to this like yoga workshop. And he was like, with who? Who's this guy? I was like, look, I don't know, but he's the real deal. And he got really mad at me. And I was like, I got to go. There's a workshop this weekend. And I got down there and this woman who I'm still friends with answered the door to the home that I was going to stay in. And it was all women. He stayed at a different place. So he was never a moment of controversy for him. And it was this conference on non-dualism. And he had unified his teachings and brought people from Buddhism and other yoga teachers and a Hindu philosopher and some Christian ministers. And we were all just talking about everything emerging from the source.
Right.
And pretty much I've been with him ever since then. And he was a disciple of Swami Rama, who is a well-revered yogi in what they call the Himalayan tradition.
Yeah.
And it's essentially a convergence of three systems: the Advaita Vedanta, Samaya Srividya, which is an internal practice of Tantra, really focusing on the goddess and devotion or bhakti from that. And then yoga from the Yoga Sutras, which might be considered dualistic. The Yoga Sutras are, but we look at the masculine and as feminine as really just emerging from one point. Shiva and Shakti are just one thing. So that's how we reconcile that. Advaita Vedanta is non-dualistic, but the Yoga Sutras explain consciousness really, really well and the process of meditation. So that's how we are able to draw from those systems.
Okay.
So I'm with Swami Jay while I'm going to college. So I have him in my ear. He's like, don't just teach asana. He was like, you need to teach at the end of your classes a meditation. So I started doing Yoga Nidra, which I first learned from you. And his system is a little bit different. It doesn't do as much of the visualization.
Right.
And then, I added meditation. And then next thing I know, I'm a full-time meditation teacher. Like it just kept happening. Yeah. And so right now my job is in the same hospital where I did my college internship project, which was an adaptive yoga class. They still teach it at the fitness center. I still teach an adaptive asana class for the Women's Heart Program. And I explain to them, hey, these are postures. This is not the entirety of the tradition. And I lead 2 sittings per week. And at the end of every one of their classes, I do a deep yogic relaxation called 61 points, or I do a mini yoga nidra.
Yeah,
and
wonderful.
And during that time, I went back to school again, got a master's degree in public health, and went to seminary to become an interfaith minister because I like to keep making things complicated. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
You ended up in doing work at Unity.
Right. Well, Unity was because Swami Jay was far away, and I lived up the street from them, and I wanted a spiritual community. And they were just like, you can do whatever you want here, whatever tradition. And the funny thing is the word yoga means unity. Yes. So I always chuckle at that. And their tradition, the Fillmores were studying transcendentalism, which is very much comes from yogic philosophy. The transcendentalists were studying, Buddhism and yoga. They admit that. So it's kind of like I found the distillate of my own tradition in modern Western form. Very Blavatsky of me, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You got your maximum congruency on your home turf.
And the church is like 1 mile from my house.
Yeah, so that all came together in the midst of children, career, everything
all
else.
Of it. It's been the one constant. I've gotten divorced, I've gotten married, I've gotten divorced, I got married. And the one constant has been this. And I really feel like it all started. And I can't give this to other people. Everybody, I believe in karma, Alan, and I believe in past lives. And it's just, I can't not believe it. And everybody has something they're working out. I picked up something that I didn't finish because it came to me so I didn't have to try. And now everything I do is really, and I use words like mindfulness when I'm talking with the community, but really what I'm talking about is yoga, the truth yoga, not stretchy, bendy yoga, which is about knowing the silence as you.
Yes.
Knowing that you and all of this are the same thing, that I am just the microcosm of all of this. That's what I'm doing in all aspects of my life.
The big participation.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Get that. Well,
but thank you for giving me my first yoga job.
Well, I knew that you were the one. It's, when you find people who have very high level of integrity and they're in a class and they've got acuity and capacity. And I was under direction when I was teaching too. Tim Gahagan was still alive. And so I was under the direction of the Bektashi Sufis while I was teaching yoga. And so
Which Sufism is just yoga.
I know, I was under, how can I say, I was undergoing my own congruity training. And I thought, yeah, Avril can do this. And I'd gotten those invitations to go to South Africa. So you were the one. And that's how that kicked off. Do you have anything that you would advise? Let's say a younger person is watching this interview and they're interested in yoga. Do you have a how-to list, or don't do that? Don't do what I did list?
No, because I think everything I did was helpful. I did spend a couple of years hanging out with the body cult, which is the stick your leg behind your head people. And they can be fun, but there is no benefit to sticking your leg behind your head. It does not make your hip healthier. In fact, it's beyond normal range of motion. Contortion is actually just not healthy. Don't get caught up in the contortion part, but have fun with it. When I was 20, I could put my legs behind my head, and now I just can't. And the idea of doing it might not be good. I could tear my labrum.
Yeah.
Don't try it. There's no don't. If you get injured, that might be a lesson too, that you are vulnerable. Yoga, one thing that I did realize is if you read autobiography of a yogi and they start talking about all these powers you can get, contortion is a power. Yeah. And it's extremely seductive. And I remember periods of time where my only focus was how fit and flexible, and you have to really work hard to get out of it. The yoga studios can be very cutthroat, like being a supermodel. They're the flight attendants now, yoga teachers. People you say, I'm a yoga teacher. A guy goes, can you stick your leg behind your head? It's very sexy. And so just be aware that there's a very seductive quality to it. And that's not at all what it was intended for. And I would say, if your practice does not include meditation, this isn't advice, it's just a fact, you're not doing yoga. You're doing stretching. And that's okay, which might be really nice. And it's a mindfulness awareness practice. It is a mindfulness practice to just stretch, but it's not yoga.
Right.
Mindfulness is in yoga, but yoga is not mindfulness. Mindfulness is a prerequisite of yoga, but it's not the totality. So all these mindfulness workshops and stuff are awesome, but to me, they're like the beginning. And it's okay to stay there. But if you really want to be a yogi, there's some deep exploration and work, and there's no way to avoid the meditation because that's how you do this, or it's something else, and that's cool.
Yeah, I agree. What do you have to say about the guru and the relationship to the guru?
So that's really tricky because that can be a really wonderful thing, or it can be an exploitive thing. I think if someone advertises that they're a guru, you should not go to them. End of discussion. If there's a website that's advertising guru this or guru that, it's that's concerning. Mm-hmm. There are really good gurus out there. You'll meet them, they'll be a teacher, and that relationship will progress from there when you're initiated by them, which they won't advertise that they do. And you'll be initiated in something like a mantra. But if they're saying, hey, give me $500 and I'll initiate you in yoga, then I would not accept that. And so this is going to be a hard process. And there's not as many people are going to get initiated, but that's okay, because if you're really supposed to, you will. And until then, read the text, get into small study groups, things like that. Those are more sincere. There are really sincere websites that aren't monetized. I had found one recently that was, so my teacher, of course, I'm biased. It's called Antara Yoga. Yeah. And actually it's not, the website is Antar, ANTAR yoga.org. And, but then there was another one that I had found recently that I thought was really cool. Like Kripalu and stuff is nice, but they're not going to purport to initiate you. So that's cool. Even the Himalayan Institute, they're not going to say they're going to initiate you. So that's good. But if they aren't saying that they're gurus, they're just a pool of teachers that have come together, if that makes sense. Yeah. But I want to see if I can find this other one. No, that's not it. I have all these Gmails that I was working through. I'll get back to you with that so you can put in the log. But I had found one recently that my friend Leela had referred to me, and they had some really interesting, more internal tantra stuff, not sexual tantra, but it was all like Tripura Rahasya, that kind of stuff inside the mind tantra.
Good.
So, but you need to pick up some of the classic texts. Like, there's no way you can do this and not read the, basic Upanishads or a good copy of the Yoga Sutras. You can't read them in a yoga journal article. You have to read them. So,
Yeah, it's not an overnight study.
no, if you're really into this, you'll never be finished.
Yeah. Let's do a time check. How's your schedule?
I got about 5 more minutes, and anybody watching this can feel free to reach out to me.
What's the email?
Let's say Avril J May, AVRILJAYMAY @gmail.com.
Okay, good. All right, good. What about your intersection with technology and medicine? What would you have to say about that in this last 5 minutes?
So technology and medicine, or just like technology and well-being?
Yeah. Well, basically coming into the medical system as we know it.
That's a really good question. I kind of need a little time to think about it. I think everything is good taken into with a grain of salt. I can't put everything into doctors, but I don't discredit them either. I work for them, but I wouldn't want to be in a relationship with a doctor who didn't listen to me. And I think now the younger doctors are so much more open, because things like yoga and even mindfulness, as dilute as it might be, more doctors know about that now than ever. I have doctors all the time referring me to their patients because my patients are stressed out, and they know I'm not a therapist. They know I'm just going to, they knew that. And they're still, Avril will help you not be stressed out. Good. So I think it can be a wonderful thing. I think technology is wonderful as long as you realize that it's a tool and that it should work for you. I'm very leery of social media still. I think you have to handle it at arm's length and take lots of breaks from it. I go on Facebook to connect with my yoga meditation group. It's just a place that we house the links for our meetings and our documents, but I don't sit on there liking all their posters and their dogs and cats and stuff, because that dopamine hit you get from those likes is really addictive. And the next thing you know, you're on all day long and you're feeling all bad because you're not in India and someone else is on the top of Mount Kailash. So for me, it hits this bad place in I start getting really depressed because I'm not in Bali. It makes me feel like I'm not doing enough. And I know that's not true. So I don't even get on it. Very, very infrequent. I keep the accounts because there's a few people who just don't know any other way to reach out to me.
I understand. So it's really about being focused. You're talking about having focus and not getting addicted, and also staying on target. Why are you on the first place, and what are you doing?
I use my little watch to track, like during the day, my heart rate, to do box breathing if I'm feeling anxious. I got a little thing on here that's like, let's breathe together, Avril. I log my meditations on it, and I like that because that's a nice dopamine hit. It's a positive feedback. I got a gold star for meditating today. If I get 10 gold stars, I get a red star. If I get 10 red stars, I get a green star. So but that's not coming from somebody else. That little star, I earned it. Nobody liked me into that star.
Yeah, you are working literally with yourself.
Yes. So, and I'm very grateful I'm not married to a social media addict either. But it's that is a serious addiction. And I think that anybody who's doing this work has to acknowledge that is no different than any of the other intoxicants that the Buddhists talk about. And I would call that my second practice, is I'm like a passive Buddhist. I'm not actively in my Buddhist practices, but I feel it resonates with me very deeply. I'm a yogi, but Buddha was a yogi. They're all siblings. Yeah.
Basically, everybody in these traditions is working with mind.
Absolutely. But the intoxicants that they talk about in Buddhism, Instagram is one of them. You have to be careful with it. It is so seductive. I could be on it for one day and I can feel it. You know, it does something.
Oh, it does. Oh, the neurology is well orchestrated by media.
Yeah.
And it'll pull your psychic tentacles out of the atmosphere of the real world and almost make them grow in.
And that's so funny that people call it virtual reality, but virtual means fake.
I know. So it's
So
not
how can it be
reality at all.
virtual reality? No, it's just virtual. That's a lie. There's no such thing as virtual reality. It's
No,
reality or it's virtual.
yeah, it's essentially a con or a word game inserted into a hypnotic phrase.
Mm-hmm.
It's like saying good, bad.
Yes, that makes no sense. And we say it all the time. But, you know, Alan, it makes me so grateful because I never got hooked like a lot of my friends are. And they get mad at me. They're like, why aren't you on Instagram? And then it makes me kind of feel like, am I antisocial? But I'm not. I'm so social. I just don't like that crap. I think it's so bad for you.
Well,
Yeah.
I think you're drawing very clear mental lines that give you a more fulfilling life. And I think that also is an essential yogic function.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's all part of Be Here Now.